Okay, so we've set up the basic server-side configuration for SignalR. What we want to take a look at now is what we need to do on the client side. So I'm just going to close all of these down. And what we need to do, we need to head over to our third tab where we've been installing things, and we need to CD up to the level of the project. So we need to be in our client folder because we're going to install an npm package here. And the one that we want for SignalR, we'll say npm install, and then we say @Microsoft / and then SignalR, and we can press return. And this should install no problems, and the version that I happen to be on, the latest version at the time of recording, is 3.1.8. And what we'll do then is we'll head over to our environment files, because inside our client, what we'll do is we'll just add the root for the hub URL. So what I'll do is I'll just add a comma, and we'll say hub URL, and we'll say https : / localhost : 5001 / hub, or hubs as we called it there, and /. And then we just need to do the same for the environment.prod so that when we publish we don't run into any problems. So we'll say hub URL, and then we'll say hubs and /. And what we'll do next, now that we have that set up, is we'll create a service to track the online presence inside our Angular client. So what I'm going to do is just clear this window and cd into source and the app, and then _ services. And what we'll do here is say nggs, and we'll just call it presence, and we'll skip -tests and press return. And now that we have that, let's go take a look. So we'll open up the presence service, and what we'll do, we'll add a property for our hub URL, and we'll set this equal to environment.hubURL. And make sure we've got the correct import there, as in not the one with prod on the end. And then what we'll do is we'll create a private property called hub connection. And this is going to be a type of hub connection that we get from SignalR. And what we'll also do in here is we'll inject our toaster service. And we'll say private toaster and toaster service. And what we want to do here is we need to create a method to create the hub connection so that when a user does connect to our application and they're authenticated, then we're going to automatically create a hub connection that's going to connect them to our presence hub. So what we'll do is we'll say create hub connection. And what we're going to pass to this is our user, because we're going to need to send up our user token or our JWT token when we make this connection as well. We cannot use our JWT interceptor. These are no longer going to be HTTP requests. These are going to be different, and typically they'll be using WebSockets, which has no support for an authentication header. So what we'll do is we'll say list.hubConnection equals a new hub connection builder, and then we specify with URL, and we're going to say list.hubURL, and then we're going to say plus, and then we're going to say presence, the same name as the endpoint that we used for our hub. And then we add a comma and some curly brackets, and inside here what we can do is we've got access to the access token factory, and this contains a string, or it returns a string containing the access token. So what we need to do here is we need to make use of this, and inside here we need to give this a method or a function, and we'll just say user.token because that's what we're going to be returning. Now underneath the with URL, we're going to give this a tiny bit more configuration, and we're going to say with automatic reconnect. So if there's a network problem, our client is automatically going to try and reconnect to our hub, and then we can say build. And this takes care of creating the hub connection. What we need to do then is we need to actually start the hub connection. So we'll say list.hubConnection, and we'll say .start, and what we'll do, we'll just catch any errors, and if we have an error we'll say console.log and error. And what we'll do then is we'll listen for the server events, we'll listen for those user is online methods and user is on offline methods. And what we'll do, we'll say list.hubConnection on, and then we can say user is online, and we get the username from this. And then what we can do is say, I'll open some curly brackets. We'll say list.toaster, and we'll say info, and we'll say username, plus, and then we'll say space has connected. Now, this is going to get old really fast because anytime a user connects, we're going to display a toast. This is just for a demonstration. We're not going to keep this in place, but we want to check to make sure our hub is working. So we'll add the second one, and this is going to be user is offline. And once again, we'll get access to the username because that's what we're returning from this method. And we'll say list.toaster, and we'll just say warning to give it a different color. And we'll say username plus has disconnected. And be careful with these because these need to exactly match. If I go back to the presence hub, these need to exactly match what we've called these methods in here. So this is what we access from the client. So we send the message when a user connects to all the other users that are already connected. And inside our present service, then when we listen to this with the on method, when this method is called and our clients are connected, then we're going to display a toast. What we also need, as well as the create hub connection, we need a way to stop the hub connection. So underneath this particular method, we'll just say stop hub connection, and we'll say this.hubconnection.stop. And once again, we'll just catch any errors that we get from this, and we'll just log out to the console. So we'll say console.log and the error. So what we need to do is actually call this method from somewhere. So we want to call this when the application first starts, if the user is logged in. We also want to stop the hub connection if the user logs out. And we also want to start the hub connection when a user logs in or when a user registers. So what we'll do, we'll head over to the app component first of all. And if we take a look at what we're doing inside the setCurrentUser, we really should check that we actually have a user before we do anything with this. So what we'll do is we'll say if user, and then inside here we're going to cut the account service and put it inside here to set the current user. And what we'll also inject in here is we'll say private, and we'll just say presence and presence service. And then what we can do when we know we've got a user, then we're going to say this.presence service or presence, and we're going to create the hub connection, and we need to pass the user so that when we create it, we can get access to the user's JWT token. Then we need to go across to our account service, and in here we're also going to need to inject our presence service. So we'll say private presence and presence service. And when we log in, we're going to set this and create the connection. So we'll say this.presence, and we're going to say create hub connection and pass in the user. We're also going to do the same for the register method. And we're also going to do the same or similar for the logout, but obviously this time we're going to say this.presence, and we're going to say stop hub connection. Now, at any other point, when our user closes their browser, moves to another website, or anything else, then SignalR automatically disconnects that client. So the only time that we need to control this ourselves is when a user logs out and they go back to the home page. We're going to make sure that we stop the hub connection in that case. So if we head over to the browser, let's just refresh the page. And if I go and inspect the console, then we can see that we have our connection information for SignalR. What we have here is WebSocket connected to localhost 5001 hub's presence. Then we've got our connection ID. And then we've got our access token. Remember I said this is access_token. This is how it's provided by default. And then we pass up our token to the connection. Now, if I'm logged in as another user and in another browser, I'm logged in as Todd, and I just simply refresh the page, then what we see is that Todd has disconnected and then Todd has connected. And if I log out of Todd, and let's just log out and go back, then we can see that Todd has disconnected. And if I log back in as Todd with the password, then we should see Todd has connected inside here. So now we're getting notifications from SignalR, but it's not particularly useful, and this is possibly the most annoying way of using SignalR, by notifying a user when anybody else connects to the website. Maybe it's useful information, but maybe a nicer way to do this would simply to show some presence information, as in colorless green, if a user is online. And we're going to take a look at that next.